Well, I wouldn't have voted for Jeremy if I didn't think he could win the general election, because I want a better Britain for my kids. But I do think he does connect with people, and he's got a coherent economic strategy. We've just had years of austerity. The economy is still limping along. We've got the biggest trade deficit since I was in primary school. We need to go for growth. We need to get real investment, modernise our infrastructure. You look at the way London's boomed over the last 15 years. That's based on the billions of pounds I got to invest in our transport infrastructure and around the Olympic site. That then attracts private investment to come along around the transport nodes you've created.
David Mellor, Corbyn's vision is connecting with people.
Well, we don't know. It's connected with enough people to make him Labour leader, but it is an astonishing result. And the question is whether it will connect more widely. It's interesting that Frances O'Grady, in her speech at the TUC conference today, instead of welcoming him unequivocally, suggested that he needed to be careful that the TUC didn't need a fan club. They needed a bunch of politicians who could actually commend themselves to a wider public. And there's no evidence that Corbyn can do that, because so much of his message is just so left-wing, he's almost dropping off the edge of the planet.
What do you say to that, Ken Livingstone?
Well, that's exactly what everyone said about me all through my political career. I managed to win, I think, 11 elections out of 14. And remember, Tony Blair said I'd be a disaster and all of that. 3 years after I became mayor, he said, well, please come back and be our candidate. Jeremy Corbyn is focused on what he can do for ordinary people. And ordinary people have been left behind. I mean, a small elite of super rich people have seen their incomes soar over the last few years. Most people, middle class and working class, are really struggling to make ends meet. And Jeremy's got the series of policies that will create good jobs for them, build homes that we can afford.
What do you say, Ken Livingstone, to people who say, in reaction to that, those all sound very popular, but they're just not realistic?
They're absolutely realistic. The Bank of England just created £375 billion of new money to prop up the banking system. It didn't cause inflation, it's done no damage to the economy. So if we can create money to save the banks, why not create money to make a modern, high-tech economy that would attract investment from abroad?
David Mellor, do you accept that London's interests are better represented, with London MPs now filling the shadow cabinet posts, as we heard in Carl Mercer's report?
No, I don't. No, I don't, because I think, what are London's interests? Is it really in London's interests, as John McDonnell is saying, he wants to nationalise all the banks? Is it in London's interests that a whole lot of privatised industries are going to go back into public ownership, heaven knows what cost, or there are people who have shares will be confiscated? It's also not going to be in London's interest. You know, one of the most interesting things about Jeremy Corbyn is a man of the street and not a man of Parliament. There's going to be a lot more demonstrations. I think there's going to be a lot more violence. You can tell in relation to this trade union bill that's being debated today. People will be out on the streets. Corbyn will not restrain them. I think it's not going to be very pleasant to live in London over the next couple of years.
What do you think?
But if you actually look at that trade union bill, I mean, here we got a government saying you've got to get 50% of the vote before you can go on strike. This government won 25% of British voters, and yet it's governing like a complete autocracy. It's really ridiculous to actually take away people's right to fight to get decent wages and decent conditions at work, and introduce all these sort of things that will try and stop that. The more you make workers poor, the less they spend, the less the economy goes. It was, one of the founders of modern capitalism, Henry Ford, who actually paid his workers, and he said, I want them to earn enough to buy the cars they're making.
OK, Ken Livingstone and David Mellor, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Thank you both.